Mark, what are the keys to conducting an effective listing presentation?
Well, an effective listing presentation is one where you come away with a signature.
Of course, that's right.
Now, the key components, I think, and I think this has changed dramatically inside of the real estate transaction over the last 10 years really, is that you've got to have 100% product knowledge. But the weird phenomena these days is that you really only are likely to use about 10% of everything that you have on board.
Why is that?
Well, I'm finding that people are time poor these days and they're expectant of instant competency. Now, so you need to be able to demonstrate or at least have the aura of being thoroughly competent and then be able to decipher with your initial exchange with that potential prospect as to which 10% you put in front of them, because you get it wrong, you miss the listing.
So how do you know? How do you know what to put in front of them?
Well, you know, there are some fairly obvious variables. They, of course, are price advice and comparative price versus market value. The second one might be fees and charges and what the investment needs to be around marketing. They're the more obvious ones. But I prefer, if you like, to set up a premise by which they're choosing me based upon my ability around marketing, negotiation, and of course communication. I mean, most estate agents, they know that they need to have marketing investment, but they can't really explain to you
why.
Well, in the first instance, precisely what marketing is.
Oh, okay.
Now, marketing's about creating perceptions, and those perceptions, of course, become a reality to the recipient. The second thing is, as it relates to marketing, how it is that marketing actually leverages value beyond comparison, beyond compare. Now, I hear a lot of salespeople say that a property's worth what a buyer or the market's prepared to bear. I think that's nonsense. I think a good salesperson says a property's worth what I can make it worth. So if I can create a perception so that that property looks at the very least its best, but in some ways better than it actually is, then I stand a very good chance of leveraging that value beyond comparison into an area that I call market value.
Okay, give me an example of how you could do that.
Well, it's very simple. It might be video marketing, it might be the angulation of the photographs, it might be the way in which you arrange the furniture. All of these things these days are available to us. You know, even this might sound like a very simple one, but I was in Brisbane the other day and we listed a property, and we basically gave the house a name. Now, the owners looked at me and thought that was a bit far-fetched to start with, but as soon as we did, all of the prospects that were coming through, this was an acreage property, started to refer to it by name, and it gave it the right, I guess, aura.
Mark, let's talk about price, the big stumbling block for a lot of agents in the presentation.
Well, the first thing you've got to do is create some clarification. There's a vast chasm between price and value. My favourite response in a listing presentation when a seller says to me, "What's my property worth?" is I basically say to them, "I don't know." Because if we're to be honest, if we're to talk about market value, we can't be certain as to where that sits without actually taking it to market. Now, there's a load of things that you bring to the property in promotion, marketing, the negotiation, setting the right parameters with buyers, and then of course the communication that you might have that can leverage that value. And then of course, if two people like the same property, then the scarcity principle comes into play. So, you know, a lot of agents, I should say, don't fully understand the difference between the two. There's a fabulous book out there, and it's called Priceless by a guy called William Poundstone. And it talks about how buyers anchor or get their reference point for value in a real estate transaction. I think it's a weird phenomena that, you know, buyers, if they chose to, could readily source information on comparative value of properties prior to actually going ahead with the purchase, but they rarely do. So this tells us that it is still an emotional transaction. It tells us that if we as salespeople understand all of the principles that underpin pricing and value, then we can manipulate this to the advantage of our clients.
So Mark, you're saying there's a difference between comparative value and market value?
Most definitely. You know, comparative value is the realistic assessment, and as I say, it's the fodder by which valuers base their realistic appraisal of value. So what I say is valuers calculate value. Now, in contrast, we should be, as real estate salespeople, focused on market value. Now, market value is not based upon reality, it's based upon possibility. So as I say, valuers calculate worth, whereas marketers create value.
Hello and welcome to this week's show. As you'll hear in just a moment, Geoff White from CoreLogic says that the final clearance rate has held up and brave sellers were rewarded last week. Back in just a moment.
Did you know you can save up to 70% on your staff costs by outsourcing the low-value, repeatable tasks so your team can focus on growing your business? Beepo is an outsourcing provider focused on the real estate industry. With an English-speaking, tertiary qualified and fully trained team in the Philippines, Beepo will give your business the boost it needs to start growing and returning value to you. For more information, visit beepo.com.au.
And joining me once again, our good friend from CoreLogic, Geoff White. G'day, Geoff. How are you doing?
Good, Kevin. How are you today?
Yeah, good. And brave sellers were rewarded last week. So actually, just before we slip into that, we might just have a quick look at the final results. What were they like, the final stats, Geoff?
Yeah, final clearance rate with a weighted average nationally of 57.7%, Kevin. So that is actually the highest final clearance rate since 13th of May 2018. So yes, it did hold up, and it was a good end. We had a very high preliminary clearance rate, you'll recall, of 62.6. So after we gathered a number of the other auction results, it did settle at 57.7. Still a great result.
Sydney and Melbourne, I noticed 62.1% in Sydney, 59.6% in Melbourne. Very, very close, weren't they?
Yeah, Sydney had 62.1 from 707 auctions, and in fact Sydney's clearance rate, that's the highest final clearance rate since the 6th of May 2018. So a very good result in Sydney, and we tipped that off the preliminary, which was higher, but it settled at 62.1. Melbourne did come back off a preliminary of 62.9 to 59.6. So look, if we rounded that up, and I'm cheeky enough to do that, it's still 60% from 968 auctions. So a pretty healthy number. But Sydney and Melbourne are pegging. It's a bit of switcheroo there, as from week to week. Yeah,
even Canberra, holding up at over 60%. Brisbane. Sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, Canberra actually had the highest clearance rate since the 7th of October 2018. So maybe you can suggest businesses back in a bit normal in Canberra now. So that's a great result. And Brisbane, of course, 34.1 from 141 auctions. So that's still holding its own. Brisbane, it's been, in that sort of range for some time there, Kevin.
Yeah.
The one the couple surprising was Adelaide. Came off a preliminary of 57.5 down to 48.3. So we gathered quite a few more auctions there, and they were significantly passed in. So 48.3 was a bit under what we thought there, but Perth, on the other hand, 43.5 from 32 auctions. So maybe things are looking on the up in Perth. So overall, a very strong weekend, really.
Was indeed. We'll have a look in a bit of detail at the Sydney regional results. Just walk us through that, mate. I think some good results there. Even Eastern Suburbs, 62% off 105. Good numbers. North Sydney.
Yeah. We were talking about North Sydney last week, or on our show earlier in the week. It had a preliminary rate of clearance rate of 85.9. Right. Well, that's settled at 77.7. Because we collected 16 more auction results there, and obviously a fair proportion of those were pass-ins, which has pulled the clearance to 77.7. Having said that, it's still a great clearance rate from 113 auctions. So that's certainly a highlight. The other one was Ryde. Again, that was high on a preliminary of 85.2. Because of the low auction numbers there, we collected 3 more auction results, and that finished at 76.7, so still a very good result. But yes, the traditional ones are City and Inner South, high 60s there, 67.1. And of course, the Inner West, 71.4. And if you look through that list, they're spread, but they're all not looking too bad there, Kevin. They're looking pretty good.
And we'll take it to Melbourne, the sub-regions there. The big auction areas up in the 60s, 60 to 64%, the ones that do the most auctions.
Yeah, that's right. The inner east, inner south, and of course the northeast, they didn't change significantly from the preliminary, so they're all still around the 60, early 60s. But yes, you'd look at the inner area, sub-region of 64.4 from 214 auctions. So that's really a lot of strength in that market. Yeah. And that only came back a bit over 1% off the preliminary. So that's a strong market. The Inner East is also really starting to look good. It's been very good this year, actually. It's 64.2 this week from 117. The ones that did change a little bit were down in the West. That final clearance rate of 47.4 from 110. Now, we had a preliminary clearance rate of 53.6, so we collected a few more results there, and they happen to be passing. So they're pretty good numbers, and when you're looking at consistently 50s, 60s, and the odd 70s, you'd have to say the market's performing quite well.
Okay, we'll have a look at auction numbers for this weekend. They are down a little bit. Sydney and Melbourne almost identical in terms of the number of properties they're taking to auction this week, Geoff.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It is very similar with a total number of 1,556. We're tracking nationally there. Sydney 639, Melbourne 684, Brisbane 96, Adelaide down with 67. Which is quite low, really, and Canberra with 49. It'll be interesting to see where these numbers settle, but I guess we're starting to get the feeling of coming into winter too, and certainly in Melbourne, climatic conditions are such that it gets a bit cold, like it is this week, and people start to think, will I sell in winter or put off for spring? And I think people are starting to realise that the market may well be improving, and if they don't have to sell, maybe they will put off selling in the hope that the market has improved by spring. So there might be a bit of that going on as well at the moment, hence the volumes could be down a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking too that a number of people might have waited until they saw what the election result was, and if in fact after the election result they decide to list, they will come through, if not next week, then maybe the week after, Geoff. It'll take a few weeks for them to come onto the market.
Yeah, that's right. You sort of have your 4 to 6 week campaign period, and by the time you get it ready for marketing, that's true. And the only thing that you'd have to consider at the moment is the Queen's birthday weekend, which affects most of the states on the 10th of June. So, avoid that weekend, and you might well have more of the market to yourself. So it'll be interesting just to see the way it pans out, as you say, after the election and coming into winter. And people are now talking about how the market's improving, and I mean, it surprises me. There's some of the people that are now talking the market up a little bit. People that were very pessimistic about 6 months ago, saying it's going to be flat for 2 years. And it just shows you how things can change in terms of the property market. So, it will be interesting to watch it over the coming months.
Yeah, we try to stick with the facts and just look at what is happening now as best we can and try and give you a bit of an understanding about that. Hey, Geoff, great talking to my friend. Just before we go, Geoff, some sad news that this, in fact, is going to be our last show, yours and mine. You're moving on. So, mate, I just wanted to thank you so much. You've made a fabulous contribution to Property TV, a wonderful contribution to this show, and you've brought us a lot of really good intel. So, Geoff, whatever you're going to do in the future, mate, all the best. And we will see more of you because your commentary is so important to us, and we'll be asking you to come and make comments as well. So, Geoff, all the best, my friend. Thank you very much for your wonderful insight.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It's been great. It's good to have these conversations with you at least twice a week, and I'll still be close to real estate with whatever I do. It's in my blood, Kevin. You know,
absolutely.
It's a bit like you, mate. You can't get out of it, can you? No matter what you do. So
don't really want
right.
to. Just love it. Just love it. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. So I'll be around, mate, and look forward to chatting with you soon. And
Look
thanks very
forward to
much
it, Geoff.
for
Thank
your
you.
support.
And
thanks,
you
mate.
for yours. Yep.
Okay.
And that's it for this week. Join me again on Monday. We'll give you a full wrap, preliminary look at what happened over the weekend. I'll see you then, and have a good weekend.
Evening, Clara. Home, please.
David, what's on your mind?
I was just thinking of a different time is all. It was a time when I used to sit up there, you know. Driving wasn't just about being taken from place to place, but going somewhere. Feeling something along the way.
Please, David, you should relax.
I'm afraid that's just the problem.
David, where are you going? David? David?